All right, Bair. I'm going to read you a quick background of yourself. Tor is a former quantitative trader, was growth at Snapchat, head of growth at Enigma. He's also a crypto OG, and he's founded the Secret Network, the Secret Foundation, which supports the Secret Network, which is a privacy-focused blockchain protocol. And he founded Stashh, which is a private NFT marketplace built on top of Secret.
I think that's accurate and awesome.
I love it. I guess we could go through hey, tell me about your background and blah, blah, blah. Happy to do that. And especially hearing how you came to Secret. But I guess first, I just want to hear what is Secret Network?
Yeah, Secret's a layer one blockchain, and it's trying to be different from every other layer one blockchain because every other layer one blockchain seems to kind of operate the same. There's questions about, who's more scalable, who's faster, who has more throughput, who does this, but they all have the same privacy problem by design. The blockchain as a foundational technology is not designed to be private. It's designed to be fully transparent. And the reason that it is that way is because that's one way to establish something like auditability. That's one way to be able to establish correctness of the state of a system across a bunch of distributed computers all over the world. But it is not the only way. So that's the radical transparency blockchain model. That's every other layer one. We believe in a future where that base layer is private by default, but you can still have a private by default base layer and correctness. You can still have the ability to run generalizable smart contracts and just not have to expose absolutely every aspect of the blockchain to every user, to every observer. That would be a huge mistake in our opinion. Unfortunately, it's also the way that every other blockchain in the world currently operates. So we're trying to open up a new paradigm. We've been the leaders on that since the beginnings of the project. It dates back to MIT in 2015 and the first white papers that were written there by the Secret Lab CEO, Guy Zivskind, who was also at MIT at the time. So yeah, somehow here we are years later, and we still don't understand, by and large, the privacy problem with blockchains. We barely understand the solutions. So we've been trying to explore what those pragmatic solutions can actually look like in practice and not just on paper.
So can you tell me why is it that, because you said you guys have been thinking about this and working on this for years now. Why is this not taken off in a way, in a major way? Unlike, Ethereum, let's say.
Some of it is just, how early does something ship, right? ETH is the OG smart contract platform, essentially, that runs in this distributed setting. And they built this massive developer community. They had this huge organization, Consensus, stewarding the early stages of its growth. That is a big hill to kind of climb. So we don't compare ourselves to Ethereum. I mean, there's no point in comparing ourselves to any other blockchain directly, honestly, except in terms of adoption. But otherwise, we have to be realistic. We launched our mainnet in 2020, and we got private smart contracts live on mainnet in September 2020. Still the only blockchain with private smart contracts, generalizable smart contracts like that live in a public mainnet. And since then, there's all these milestones you have to hit. First, you have to get the network live. Then you have to see the first dApps go live. Then you have to see adoption for those dApps. Then there's usually one bull market cycle, one bear market cycle. Things implode, things regrow. Not a lot of people were using Ethereum in 2018, 2019 for anything beyond what they were using it for in 2017, which was mostly ICO speculation. It took the next cycle until we saw a DeFi summer and all the yam farming. And then, of course, until we saw real traction for NFTs in that huge growth period from that last bit of 2020 all through calendar year 2021. That was massive. So Secret is one cycle behind, but it's many technological cycles ahead if you come at it from that thesis of privacy by default is the future. That's the hardest possible thing, probably an impossible thing, to add to a public base layer, because once something's public, it's public forever. You can't just rewrap it, put it back in the bag. The private by default base layer, you have to consider that from day one. So I think the reason we didn't see traction before this for a private by default smart contract platform, as opposed to a completely public smart contract platform, has less to do about product market fit or user demand or anything like that. It just has to do with timing. But now we're one cycle past where we're going to be. We're building the foundation now. And now we have dozens of apps launching on the network, on a public mainnet that users are actually using. Stashh is just one of them. There's dozens. And we can talk about some of them. I mean, they're in DeFi, they're in NFTs, they're in every place that you would think they are, but there's some stuff that can only be built on a blockchain that comes with privacy by design. That's what I'm most excited to see, because to this point, these are things that haven't been possible.
Totally. Yeah. And speaking of that, it's like, whenever I think of blockchain, automatically I'm like open, transparent, auditable database. So, so by it's kind of like breaking my mental model of what it even is a blockchain. So,
sort of, but I should say that most of the adjectives you just used are still correct. We're talking about something that's open and auditable. It's just not radically transparent. You know, transparency and privacy are just two sides of the same coin. All you're saying is there's this piece of information. Some parties should have access to it. Some parties should not have access to it. We want control over how that information is made available. The public by default blockchain solution, the radically transparent solution, is to say it's the same control model for every piece of data. Everything is public to absolutely everyone, and do what you will. So when you're thinking about secret, I mean, you could make something fully transparent on secret. You can make it work just like a regular blockchain for any application. Just make everything public. It's trivial to build something on secret that works like it works on Ethereum. It's just impossible to build certain things on Ethereum because you need that privacy by default to even have them exist. We're still open. We're still auditable. You know, even if something's encrypted, it can still be auditable. We can still get to verified correctness of the state of the system, all the things you expect from a blockchain. We just have a different data model that happens to be substantially more secure and more flexible as a foundation.
Okay, so yeah, could you explain, like, I'm 5 years old, like in terms of, because I understand how, you know, relatively how do you call it? A public blockchain works. If you call it public versus private.
Sure.
But and private not meaning like a bank blockchain, meaning like your blockchain.
Right. I always say permissionless, and then there's public and private. I know it gets tricky, but I hear you.
Right. So yeah, tell me how that works, and the way that secret works. Is there any sort of downside in terms of, I don't know, let's say like security, or is it, you know, because usually there's that like trilemma where you have to give up on security or on this. Do you guys have that?
Yeah. There's always a trade-off to, even if you look at the subset of potential privacy solutions for a blockchain, right? Every potential solution that you would think of implementing to protect privacy, they all have trade-offs. You know, hardware versus homomorphic encryption versus multi-party computation versus zero knowledge. All of those have trade-offs. Privacy tech is a very complex space that on crypto Twitter gets condensed to a lot of memes, honestly. Like, it's a very misunderstood topic. But even just having privacy at all, yeah, there's a trade-off. Usually the trade-off is something around performance or cost of computation, right? If you want to do something as a secure computation as opposed to doing everything in the open, it's going to go slower. There's usually some performance cost of needing to encrypt and decrypt or re-encrypt inputs, outputs, the state of the system. That all has trade-offs. So things go maybe a little slower. But I mean, Ethereum's not exactly known for being the fastest thing on Earth. And people are used to apparently waiting like hours or days for confirmations from layer twos. I mean, really what we're talking about here is, you know, if you want to build, let's say, consumer dApps on some sort of public, I'll say permissionless blockchain, the throughput for most of that is just like, it is not great. Using blockchains for everything is not a great solution. You should use them for what you want them to be used for. But that kind of takes us to NFTs, right? Like, people are using blockchains to secure their ownership of digital assets. And a public by default blockchain is probably good for that in some ways and really bad for that in other ways. And that's one place where I think a private by default blockchain strictly dominates a public by default blockchain, because you're not caring about things like performance nearly as much as you're caring about things like security. You want the expensive digital assets you own to be secure. You want to be able to share access to them with the right people, not every person. You just want some level as a user of control. Otherwise, why use a blockchain at all? Just leave it in whatever walled garden made the asset in the first place. But that's not what we're trying to create. You know, we're trying to create an actual open, permissionless, interoperable blockchain universe. And for that, I do think that blockchains are good, but private by default blockchains are strictly better.
Yeah, it's almost like, why would you not? It just, if you have the optionality, then of course use that.
Yeah.
But so, okay, speaking of that, because you guys have built this, you said it launched in 2020.
Yeah, it exists.
And Stashh is live, and you said there's dozens of other dApps or apps, whatever you call them, currently live. You know, why is this not mainstream in terms of like everyone should know this already? Right. And I feel like it's weird that a lot of people don't. And there's a bigger question I have on that, but I want to hear your.
Sure. I think it's still just what I said. Like, it comes back to timing, right? Our growth for the network came through the bulliest of bull markets, right? Through that 2021 period. If a mainnet goes live in 2020 and your dApps are going like Stashh hit mainnet in December of 2021, right? Right as I think a lot of the hype was peaking around NFTs, not before. And if you think about when, for example, OpenSea was launching, right? They weren't launching right into the beginning of a hype bubble. They kind of sat around for 2 years, and then there was an NFT explosion, and they were primed to take advantage of that because they had built something one of a kind and incredible with foresight about the direction that this market would take, not because they saw what was already happening, but because they knew what was possible. So it's sort of the same thing when you think about the timing around Secret, and then also its dApps. You know, we're launching into this crazy bull market. The first thing people are thinking about is not, how do I make my assets more secure? How do I make sure the systems I'm using are sustainable? That's not the questions they're asking. They're asking, how can I make as much money as possible, as fast as possible? You know, there's no thought to downside. They're just like, we're going to lever up everything. Everything is leveraged, stacked on leverage. And entire L1 ecosystems grew, as we now know, based on a lot of this self-reinforcing liquidity or rehypothecated liquidity. I would summarize and kind of say just like a lot of that just wasn't real. It just wasn't. It was kind of stacked on itself. And when it all went poof, now we're back to, oh, well, no one's using anything. Like, it's all dead. Everything's going to be bad. And you have to think, okay, eventually people are going to start using things again, but this time they're going to use different things. What are they going to use? What are they going to be betting on? At the beginning of the last major hype cycle, they couldn't bet on Secret. They couldn't bet on Stashh. They couldn't bet on these kinds of secure private applications that give you this incredible foundation. You can build so many more things. It revolutionizes blockchain gaming, prevents MEV, has front-running resistance for DeFi, like all these things. It wasn't there. Now that people are building that foundation again, that foundation at the layer one, it is there, and you can build those things. The dApps are live. You can build on them. That's what people need to find out about. Now it's an awareness issue. Then it was a timing issue. But now I really do think it's an awareness issue. There's not, in my experience, been a lot of people who have discovered secret NFTs and they're like, yeah, these are all right, but I really wish they worked like regular NFTs. No one says that. Honestly, we have a very sticky community, but all the big money, it takes a very long time for that kind of activity to migrate from Ethereum or migrate from a Solana into some other ecosystem. But as we're seeing things that we thought were super sticky, there's PFP projects moving chains. Maybe they're not that sticky. Maybe projects are looking for that strong long-term foundation. And I think when they discover Secret, they're going to realize they've found a long-term home.
Yeah. So there's a broader question here in terms of the Web3 crypto ecosystem and attention, and and also just like belief in general, because whatever seems to get the most attention, like that's like the driver for everything. It's like if you market effectively, you can become successful because so much of this relies on like attention and then belief, which is a shame, but also like it makes sense. I think most of the world like runs off that, so it's like I get it. But what are your thoughts there? Are you like, I need to play the game? I can
explain that. No, I mean, I can explain that, right? I have a formula for attention, right? Attention equals time times people. And people only have so much time in the day. There's only so many people in the world. When I worked at Snapchat, I coined this metric that I kind of called total addressable social hours. And it was saying like, not just how many people are in a given country, but how much time they're already spending on social media or social platforms. And it turns out that Brazil, for example, has more total addressable social hours than the United States. It has fewer people, but they're on social media like 50% more per day. They're obsessives. And attention in that case becomes a different sort of idea. It's not just like each person is created equal. Certain people have different degrees of obsession that they're willing to give to something. And the real obsessives in the crypto space were the people, at least to this point, right? They were obsessed with the idea of making as much money as they could as fast as possible. And those are the obsessives we got. And then every product that got built on this core tech appealed to that core audience. And it looked like it was working because there were so many addressable minutes from those people. And they also controlled a lot of the capital. So all the TVL was also coming from those people. But then we started over optimizing for those people. And it turned out a lot of those people didn't really have money at all or were rehypothecating user funds. And then it all collapsed on itself. We got really far down a really dangerous path of optimizing only for that. But now we're kind of in a new world, right? It used to be that attention's always going to be scarce because there's only so much time in the day, only so many people. But capital used to be rampant. So we had so much capital, so little attention. So the people who were best at capturing that attention attracted all the capital. Now capital is also scarce. So you also need to have some kind of model for why your attention scheme might have some kind of sustainability. It might be a feedback loop. It might create a real long-term community instead of like a quick hit of dopamine. Because if you don't have that, and remember, for that, we're competing against the dopamine machines of the Web 2 world, which have already been greased and optimized for years. You know, if you're not thinking along the same lines of how do I make this more sustainable, then not only are you not building with the Web 3 ethos, you're not going to get the capital anymore. People won't just throw money at things that seem to be sticking for a short amount of time. They really want to understand the thesis, where it's going, and why it should be there. I'm grateful that that's the world we're in now. Yeah, it makes your life hard as a founder. It can obviously make your life hard as an investor, but it's healthier. It's healthier, and the right things get built. And then you can build on top of those right things to create the architecture for an NFT ecosystem or any type of blockchain ecosystem that's actually going to be self-sustaining.
You have this awesome growth background, and you've super experienced in Web 2, Web 3, and thinking about growing Secret, because you guys launched and then you built Stashh after. And what was the thought process of like, okay, we need to get the most number of use cases as soon as possible. So, NFTs can be used for a wide range of things. We already have DeFi applications on here. Like, what was that? Do you have like a go-to-market where you're like, all right, I'm going to do NFTs and then I'm going to do this and blah, blah, blah. And like, tell me about that.
Well, it's a very community-driven ecosystem, right? So some people in our community are deeply passionate about DeFi. Some are deeply passionate about metaverses and gaming. Some are deeply passionate about enterprise use cases. Secret's just a tool. It's the first blockchain that can do this stuff. So you can do everything with it. What gets built is ultimately what interests the people in the community who want to expand those use cases. We had people in the community who wanted to build non-fungible tokens and a non-fungible token standard, because not only were they passionate about it, they also understood that those are the types of foundational technologies and contracts you need to scale the ecosystem. If you wanted proof of that, you would just look at Ethereum. What let Ethereum grow was the ERC20 token standard, and then it was the ERC721 token standard. Those standards became the foundation that these entire ecosystems grew on. So Secret needed the same. It needed a SNP20 token standard for fungible tokens, then a 721 standard so that we could have non-fungibles. And those are just becoming the building blocks for much more complex applications. Stashh is a very complex application, not just at the smart contract layer, but just everything that happens on it. It's what most applications in the Web3 space are going to end up being, which is really complex, a little Web 2.5y, but they put the user at the center of everything. They're not solutions in search of a problem. They understand why they need to exist. And the reason they choose to build on Secret is because Secret lets them build that solution. They say, I want to serve this user use case in a specific way. For that, I'm going to need Web3 privacy. For that, I'm going to need this foundation of Secret. That's how it goes. But the way that people thought about layer ones to this point was, I'm launching a layer one. I need to have a 10-figure valuation for this layer one. We sold a lot of tokens to a lot of people and told them it was worth a lot of money. To justify that, we need these 6 to 7 apps to exist so people take us seriously as a layer one. And now everybody thinks we're a cool layer one. So now what else can we do? And that was the playbook. That was the playbook for like every major VC-backed layer one for probably the better part of at least 18 months. That's how it felt to me. And I watched those same mistakes happen in 2017, 2018 with all the professor coins. It's just history repeating itself. But ultimately, there's things that win out because they really serve user interests. And who I like more than anybody else, who I respect more than anybody else specifically for that in the entire crypto space?
Who?
Is Stanny. Because Stanny killed it with Aave.
Oh, yeah,
and then he killed it with Lens. Like, you have to be able to look at somebody who can build teams, and then those teams ship these incredible products, and they do it twice in 2 completely different areas and absolutely nail what users are looking for at the time that they're looking for it. And then you look around and you see so much vaporware in comparison. So hopefully we reevaluate our heroes. That's one of mine, and in 2023 and beyond, let's get some new heroes. Let's look at building layer one ecosystems a little differently. Let's get incredible product and community builders into these L1 ecosystems to partner with these genius L1 protocol devs. And let's build things people actually want to use, and let's find a way to make sure they're going to still be here in 5 to 10 years.
So to play devil's advocate, do people care about privacy?
I hear this all the time. Usually they're telling me that they don't. They don't ask. They're just like, people don't care about privacy, and they leave it there. They don't even ask my opinion. I'm very grateful because we didn't partner with Apple, but they did a lot of marketing for us, and that was really nice. They basically ran a multi-billion-dollar campaign for months about the value of privacy to the everyday user. And so what was a difficult conversation in 2017, 18, whatever, became a lot easier suddenly when there was commercials on TV every single day about how normal privacy was and how it was an expectation for users. I'm trying to remember his name, but one of the senators today that was tweeting about they were trying to figure out why exactly OFAC sanctioned Tornado Cash. And he himself tweeted privacy is normal. And I credit the Zcash team for really pushing that line publicly because privacy is normal. The reason people probably think users don't care about privacy is because it is so normal. It is so much like the oxygen we breathe that you don't find yourself constantly talking about it, but you know when you don't have it. You feel when it's gone. It's so intangible a lot of the time. We don't understand what we've given up until it's already gone. But when it is tangible, it's so disturbing. Like if you wake up and there's a dude with his face pressed against the windows of your house, you think your house is private until you suddenly realize that somebody's watching you all the time inside of it. We don't want to market privacy by fear. We don't want to scare people into valuing their privacy, but we also don't want to wait for people to get hurt by a lack of privacy before they start to understand its value. We don't want to wait till they get hacked for their Bored Apes. We don't want to wait until, surveillance capitalism wins out and CBDCs are the norm and they have no privacy by default. We're not really waiting around. That's why we try to ship solutions pragmatically as quickly and as pragmatically as we can into production. But it's certainly the case that users are undereducated about their privacy and their right to privacy and their options for privacy. I don't think that putting privacy at the center of a product is necessarily the best way to get a user to FOMO into it, but it is a really great way to make sure that a product they love is sustainable and is there when they need it and when they want it, and makes them feel emotionally, feel good, feel secure, and feel like they're using something good.
Yeah, and just when you said privacy is normal, I was thinking about just email. I was like, well, yeah, people don't just see my email, but in my blockchain wallet, people see
some people do.
yeah, probably. It's probably more than I think. But with my blockchain wallet, people see, everything. Andrew's doing this, Andrew's saying this, he has this much money, he likes these assets, whatever. And just extrapolating that out to email, I'm like, whoa, that'd be crazy. So you're absolutely correct about it being extremely normal. So talking about going back to the users, what have you experienced or what have you found to be hey, we got to grow this. What is the best way to do it?
What's the best way to get users in Web3?
Yeah, which is a question I think a lot of people probably have.
It changes, man. So I separate growth out into the two aspects, right? Because when you talk about growth, what you're really talking about is systems theory. And there's these two very separate sort of functions within growth. There's the acquisitive part of growth, and then there's the retention part of growth. Acquisition is all about how do we get new attention for what we're doing. You're nurturing new attention. You're taking somebody from either not being aware of what you're doing, or maybe they know what you're doing but don't understand it, or maybe they understand it but they haven't valued it. You're nurturing that into some kind of engagement until they perform some kind of key action. They do something with your product that's valuable to them, and it's valuable to the product, and it's valuable to the community that uses the product. Like every Web3 product is networked and social. In the real world, not every product is networked and social, but pretty much every Web3 product works that way and has these social dynamics. So you have to be concerned with that system. That's the acquisition and activation part. The retention part comes from you have their attention. How do you make sure they still stick around? And in my experience, that's a lot harder because the acquisition part, there's no magic bullet, but something that starts working has a tendency to keep working. That object in motion stays in motion. Hypey stuff stays hypey until the point of, let's say, the mint or the drop or whatever. You build that anticipation. Then the thing happens. Everybody's there and they all do the thing. And there's this crazy rush of emotions and it mints out and everybody's psyched. And then there's no roadmap and the whole thing implodes. And, that's the retention part. They've moved on to the next drop, the next dopamine hit, which is only ever, in a bull market, maybe less than 24 hours away. And in a bear market, you're still always looking for the next thing. You're looking for that next fix, in essence. So there's not a lot of complexity when it comes to understanding like what makes something grow initially. A lot of it is like network effects and hype and social proof and being in with the right crowds, the same stuff that makes it work in the real world. But people aren't thinking enough about retention. Like, how do you hold on to that community for the long term once they're there? And for that, there needs to be some kind of value past the initial point of interaction with that product that users continue to get every time they come back and interact with that product or interact with that ecosystem. Otherwise, you have nothing. You had sand. And maybe that was good if all you needed to do was raise 7 figures for a drop. But if you actually wanted to build a business or a community or something like that, it's the retention part people don't understand. I find that to be the much more interesting question. What makes people actually stick around longer than the part where they thought they were going to get super rich?
Yeah, so it's like the easiest ways for acquisition is making money, and the retention part is like real use case, like actual value to whatever you're trying to do. So
yeah, and a lot of that in the Web3 space, ultimately, especially on NFTs, is social. Now in DeFi, it really becomes an engineering problem more than a social problem. With DeFi, it's just like people show up for the yield. As long as there's yield, they'll stay. Certain products are architected in a very smart way, and the yield is a little more sustainable. And then people don't retract their liquidity, or there's arbitrary barriers put up. Oh, you get these boosted yields, but there's a cooldown period of 12 to 21 days or 3 years or whatever it is, or you stake your ETH and you never know when you're going to be able to withdraw it again. All these different ways to engineer the idea that value is going to stay in the system. You literally can't leave, but that happens in the real world too, right? That's what a certificate of deposit is. People are used to the idea of locking up capital for some kind of ultimate return, but they set it and forget it. A successful DeFi product is one that serves its purpose. It gets capital to show up, and then something sort of forms around that. In the NFT, metaverse, gaming space, like all these things that we think are going to be either replacing or augmenting these legacy systems, it's a bit more like a social engineering problem than anything else. They need to come. They need to have an incredible emotional experience. They need to meet like-minded people, and they all have to stick around. Because then you're at risk of like an ecosystem collapse. If influential people within that ecosystem start to leave, take their communities with them, you can have what looked like was happening with this ecosystem collapse on Solana, let's say. All the biggest PFP projects migrate to ETH, Polygon, Secret, whatever. And that can happen. It can collapse all at once. Same as like if 90% of a particular LP pool in a DeFi protocol is being provided by a single account. If they pull it, it's over. You just got rugged. That's essentially what that was. So yeah, it's definitely thinking about the retention piece, thinking about which people or which actors in your system are the most critical to retain, how you do that. And if you can keep them around, ideally, you're also keeping the rest of the users around. And the more you have an actual distributed social graph, let's say for an NFT protocol, the more equitable it actually is, the more sustainable and resilient it is. If every user has value, then one leaving doesn't collapse the system. But one time Kylie Jenner threatens to quit Snapchat and, share price fell 20%. You got to be careful. how much you want to architect your ecosystems around those centralized sources of capital or influence.
All right, so let's think about I want to hear about the use cases that you really enjoy today. And I also want to hear about some use cases that aren't live yet, but could be live in the future.
Yeah. All right. Now we're talking. Are we saying for what tech?
Well, then let's do Secret and then let's do Stashh. We'll do them separately because I think that this.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, Secret, I always chop up the apps into a few different categories. There's two main categories, honestly, and then we'll get into each. The two main categories are very simple. Things you can build on other blockchains, things you can't build on other blockchains. And remember, this category is really big because completely public by default base layers are not interesting for 99.99% of applications. You wouldn't use Uber if everybody knew where you lived instead of just your driver. You wouldn't trust Equifax if you thought everybody could see your social security number, even when it gets hacked, and they can. So we really care about this private category a lot. But under this category, I mean, you can still think of like DeFi protocols, NFT protocols, metaverses, all the things you can build on an Ethereum, you can build on Secret. It's just as generalizable, right? There's no drawback to the network of like the design space is smaller. The design space is actually orders of magnitude larger. The trade-offs are all around things like performance, but they don't even have to be around performance because there's a lot of optimization that can be done at the dApp layer. There's a lot of dApps on Ethereum that are awful, not because they are built on Ethereum, but because the UX is atrocious. We would love for Secret apps to have incredible UX. And so that even though they're built on a private by default base layer, it doesn't feel like you're giving up usability. In fact, you're gaining usability and you're gaining security and so on and so forth. There's this meme that privacy means poor UX, and it doesn't have to be that way. It's just lazy design. So DeFi, NFTs, metaverses, that can all exist, regular blockchains, but there's a whole category here of all the stuff that can't. So for example, we call a lot of these privacy as a service applications, where something that you want to use as a distributed application still needs to interact with private data. And so you use Secret to run those smart contracts. An example would be a game that wants to use Secret to run all the game logic. So you show up, you want to have a battle with another player. Well, it's not interesting if you already know here's everything the other player is already bringing to the battle, and you already know like this is exactly the skills, this is exactly how things are going to play out. Why even go to war at all? Why even play the game if you already have perfect information? So imperfect information games are a killer, broad use case for the network. If you want to think more seriously about uses of blockchains beyond just games and user engagement, then you think about things like multi-party computation over a bunch of sensitive user data. And now Secret, you're running those applications on Secret. You can run a data marketplace on Secret, for example, where again, you can have verification for the data set and then you're using it on Secret, but because only the buyer might have access to the data set instead of the entire blockchain has access to that data set. Now there's actual value to that data set. Things actually having value is really important if you're trying to build some kind of marketplace application. We have a project called Alter that built an entire private messaging platform and protocol on top of Secret, using Secret for private key management. There's another project we just had on Twitter Space called PriFi Labs, and they're building a bunch of different products that are leveraging this, and they're actually combining Secret with Ethereum. There's a project called Serenity Shield that's doing something like that as well. All of these are like privacy as a service apps on Secret, and they can't exist on any other blockchain. Some of them are integrating with Ethereum and Solana and things like that, but really the thing that allows them to exist is the fact that they're using Secret smart contracts.
Yeah, so, sorry, you said that Secret, they're working on Secret and Ethereum at the same time. Explain that.
Well, I'll actually explain it in the context of Stashh. That might be the easiest way to think about, because right now, yet again, I'm going to try to shatter every single model that you have in your head for what a layer one is, man. And I love doing that for people. But think about it. Right now, we think, here's a dApp. Okay, what layer one is it on? We're giving all the power to the layer one. We're saying the reason something is valuable is because it was built on ETH. The reason something's valuable is because it's built on Solana. And that's BS. For most blockchains that work identically to each other, the power is in the dApp. The dApp owns the user experience. They own the user, or it's the wallet, right? The user interacts with the wallet. They're very rarely interacting with the chain. The biggest value a dApp gets from a blockchain most of the time is like the economic security or the liquidity of having that base layer token available broadly to users, and they don't have to invent their own. But, Secret obviously works differently. You can build things on Secret you can't build anywhere else. That base layer is actually valuable to the dApp because they couldn't exist without it. So a lot of the features on Stashh are powered by Secret. Things that we're using for user identity management, we're trying to use Secret contracts for that. The NFTs that are on Stashh, a lot of them are Secret NFTs. They're private by default. Only the owner can unlock the private metadata. Only the owner chooses whether they want to display their NFTs publicly or not. It's not like your ETH wallet where someone can see literally everything you hold and have ever held and will ever hold and everything you've ever done. It's private by default.
If I reveal my NFT, my secret NFT, is that revealed forever? Okay, can I?
You can rewrap it and send it to a new address, and no one will see the new address it was sent to. So you could have it publicly displayed on a profile, rewrap your ownership, and send it. That's cool. You could never put back in the bag that address at one time owned that NFT. That's what you chose to do.
Totally.
But you're not breaking future state and doxing that particular aspect forever. I mean, that's how if we had the choice, that's how NFTs should have always worked. It just, that wasn't the foundation we were using when NFTs got super big. But there's nothing about NFTs that says the base layer has to be public for them to be valuable. It's pretty much the opposite. I think that NFTs would be 100x more valuable if only they were all on a base layer with privacy. But to get back to the question we were asking, Stashh is not a platform that assumes the only type of NFT with value is a private by default NFT. So Stashh itself is actually a multi-chain application. You can import and connect your wallet from a bunch of different L1 ecosystems. So we support currently Ethereum, Polygon, and Solana wallets on Stashh. If you connect your wallet to your profile, you can import assets from all those chains and put them on your Stashh profile. It's just that we don't think they're as interesting, so we didn't build as many features for those. But clearly users already of today think those NFTs have value. And many of them do, right? They underlie all kinds of PFP communities. They unlock access to things. They're kind of like tickets in the door for certain stuff. I don't personally find public by default NFTs altogether interesting, but I'm not going to deny the fact that the market does and people already use them. I just want to educate that market about how much more is possible with secret NFTs. But the only way to get their attention long enough to teach them that, to get them to pay attention, is to let them come in and experience value with what they already own, which is ETH NFTs, Polygon's NFTs, and Solana NFTs, or whatever other layer one NFTs. Let them use Stashh, let them discover that community and all the features on the platform, not forcing them to buy a bunch of stuff they don't need. Instead, they come in with what they already have and they experience value right away. That's how you attract users. That makes Stashh a multi-chain app, but what makes Stashh different and what's going to allow it to have this long-term sustainability and this differentiated value is the fact that we've integrated so tightly with Secret for so many of its features. It makes it a platform that's not only unique, but sustainable. And when users experience that on a regular basis, they're going to start to understand, hey, this platform is special. What it's built on is special. And they dive a little deeper, and then they become very long-term members of the community, because what are they going to switch to? There's nowhere to go to. There's nowhere to go back. Once you get privacy, no one's ever woken up and they've said, I really wish I didn't have all this privacy. Really wish what am I doing with it? Can I pay someone to take it? It's like, no one thinks that way. They're only ever thinking about what they would give up in order to get that privacy. And most of the time, there's nothing in the world you can do. You either have it or you don't.
All right. So this is going to be a dumb question. Can I take my Bored Ape NFT on Ethereum, bring it to Secret, and wrap it in like a secret NFT and make it like private, or does that not work?
What a great question. I mean, what you're describing is a bridge, right? So this is a use case we think about a lot. People have all these super valuable ETH-based assets and they need to privatize them, right? Well, no matter what you're doing, you're going to need to use something that isn't just the Bored Ape itself. And today you have some choices, right? Maybe you build some sort of NFT mixer directly on ETH or something like that. Maybe you use a centralized thing, like you deposit it into FTX's marketplace. Good luck. And my point is that there's already solutions that kind of exist and they kind of serve things. The best solution is to make those assets exist by default on Secret. Like when I look at DGods, for example, you know, who arbitrates what the actual DGOD is? What chain does it live on? Well, we all thought it was the one that was on Solana. Is it going to be one that's on a different chain instead? How are they going to do that migration? At what point, like, are they both going to have value? Would only one have value? So it's the same thing when you're thinking here, like, what if we change the base layer for apes? They already thought about launching their own chain. Is it just Yuga Labs now says forever the actual apes are the ones that live on our chain? So any collection could theoretically migrate to Secret and just issue a whole new set of NFTs on Secret, have a bridge, and then burn, right? One side of the bridge just gets burnt. As soon as you bridge it to Secret, the Secret NFT is the real thing for all intents and purposes, and the other one is just gone. And yes, now you've privatized your ape. And of course, you can always choose to reveal it again and do whatever else, but that would truly convert it. The other option is like a custodial bridge. You send your ape to an ETH to Secret bridge. It gets locked in the bridge contract. You never burn the original ape, but now you have an ape equivalent that you know is one-to-one. The only way to unlock the original ape is with your new ape. You know, that's the only way to bridge back and get the ETH asset again. So a lot of people might choose to do that. That's a safer model. We're exploring that with Axelar. Axelar is a bridge provider that works with a lot of different ecosystems. They're already integrated with Secret and serve the fungible token side of the ecosystem. They're working on a lot of general message bridges that would allow us to do exactly what you're describing. But to me, the most interesting thing and the thing that we're prioritizing in development is take your Bored Ape, come to Stashh, connect your Bored Ape wallet with Stashh. Stashh can check whether you own a Bored Ape. It's public information on a blockchain. We don't need your permission to know you own a Bored Ape, realistically. Like, we'll just already know. But as soon as you connect it to your Stashh profile, now you can claim a brand new NFT with your Bored Ape, but only if you own one. Now you can do like exclusive collections of secret NFTs only for people who own Bored Apes. And instead of asking them to maybe set their ape on fire or bring it over a bridge and they're scared about security, it can never leave your wallet. Just check in. It checks whether you have ownership. You never sign a transaction that sends your ape anywhere, but we're going to give you a secret NFT. And in that secret NFT is something only for you as the owner of the Bored Ape. And you know that only Bored Ape owners can claim this thing. And now it has value. So I think before we start trying to get users to go over bridges and things like that, we need to teach them that secret NFTs are valuable. They're more secure. They do all these things. And then maybe they start thinking, I really should just bridge this thing, or really I should launch my next collection on Secret, because why would I ever leave Secret? If this is where I'm going to get all this security, where else would I go?
All right. So continuing to talk about use cases, and I have to bring this up. You know I have to. And this is also where my brain's at. I recently tweeted, you know, whoever makes the AI generated OnlyFans is going to make so much money. And just thinking about like user behavior, like what's more, people like are like love OnlyFans, people love pornography, people love not safe for work. What is the thought process there? I feel like you guys should just dive into that realm and just like
there is a team building an OnlyFans on Secret. And I can't talk about them yet. I think they just finalized some branding. There is also a not safe for work category on Stashh. You have to, authenticate yourself for it, but we've had a lot of not safe for work collections launch on Stashh, and Stashh is just a marketplace. It's just a portal to the discovery of all of these different projects, and these communities get curated wherever they get curated. I mean, you're absolutely right. Like, a lot of traction for things tends to come from when there's this, not safe for work image or performer, and they want to form a more direct connection with an audience. So they turn to OnlyFans or, in some cases Patreon while they can. And those just, they're very centralized, and you can get deplatformed and it sucks. So clearly a decentralized solution would be good. Yeah, you can do that on Secret. You can do that on Stashh. We don't market that as the core value prop of the platform, not because we don't believe in that use case, but just because it is such a narrow use case relative to, we want to serve every artist, every creator in this way. Once you start selling yourself as being like, we only do this, you're really selling yourself short. But I do agree that as an educational opportunity and as an opportunity to serve a particular type of creator or collector that's vastly underserved everywhere else, absolutely. Absolutely. And I do hope they discover Secret, and I do hope that they discover Stashh. Very
cool. All right. So what I don't know if this could be a great use case. Maybe it's not, but I'm thinking about like legal contracts and like loans and things like that. Things that you want certain parties to see, but obviously not everyone to see. But you also want it to be like verifiable. Yeah, it was done on this date, and you sign with your wallet there for it. It's kind of like a signature, actual written signature. Is that I mean, I don't know, DocuSign, is that kind of a use case that you guys have been thinking about?
Yeah, those kinds of things, I agree with you because they're very unique to secret. But those would be like part of the access control parts of these only on secret use cases. Like privacy as a service is one, access control is another major vertical for secret apps. And it's anything like that, anything where certain parties should have access to certain information and other parties shouldn't. I mean, you can have it where, I mean, forget a legal contract for a second. Let's just think about a smart contract. You can have a smart contract on secret where two parties can know exactly how the code works, how exactly the code in the contract works. It's public to everybody what this contract is supposed to do, but only the people interacting with it know the data. So only you and I know the underlying data we sent to this contract. Only we can decrypt what we sent to the contract. I can't even decrypt yours. You can't even decrypt mine. But the contract could confirm certain things like your data is equal to mine. My data is greater than yours. These are generalizable contracts that can do that kind of secure computation. And that's what, when we say like multi-party compute, that's the type of use cases that we're describing. Multiple parties need to do something, need to have some sort of agreement, but they don't necessarily want the outside world to have access to what the data is that's going into the terms of the contract. And they don't even want other parties to necessarily have access to the data that's going into the terms of the contract. So that's one thing. And then what you're talking about, where it's just like, let's just have something to store the terms for what we did, but we're going to encrypt the terms. We're going to encrypt the terms. Only certain people can have access to the terms. But also, maybe only those people can see whether the terms were met. Or there's somebody with a viewing key who has access to adjudicate it, but can't edit the state, as like an auditor. That's, again, an access control use case. We have viewing key and query permit models built into the foundation of the entire layer one, which is why, going back to what we said before, you're still describing an open and auditable system when you talk about secret. You're just not talking about a radically transparent system that is auditable by everyone, including North Korea. I think that's important.
Yeah, it is. It's comical when you say it because it's absurd, but in reality, that is the truth. Like they can view everything that's going on, which is wild. All right, so what if you had to choose one singular use case? What is it? What would it be? That is like your favorite.
Give me a time horizon. Give me a time horizon, because if you gave me 2 decades, right? What we're talking about, secure computation in a distributed setting, is revolutionary in the way that the internet was revolutionary. Like, because imagine like if everything in the world could run in a way that was less centralized, less ability for it to be censored or corrupted, and also was privacy preserving by default. If every application ran that way, if Uber ran that way, if your credit scoring algorithm ran that way, it's revolutionary. So it could be everything. If you said for the next 6 to 12 months, given the current state of the technology, given the current maturity of the user ecosystem, I mean, I'm very biased. I'm very interested in what we're trying to do with Stashh, which is onboard a lot of users who are very passionate about what they do in Web3. Like, no one would ever argue that people who collect and trade and create NFTs are not passionate. They're probably the most passionate and least cynical user base in Web3. DeFi users can be super cynical, but NFTs really bring joy in a lot of ways. That is a great beachhead market for educating the next generation of Web3 users of any type about the value of privacy. And I think what we've done is teach them that privacy matters specifically when you think about questions of identity and reputation and ownership. NFTs are an incredible teaching tool about exactly those aspects of Web3. They're also learning about speculation from a lot of NFT platforms, which you could also learn from DeFi. But I'm less interested in that. I really want to see, like, in the next 6 to 12 months, what can we do? What these use cases specifically around identity and reputation, exclusive content, marketplaces for exclusive content, whether it's data marketplaces, asset marketplaces. That's really interesting to me. And these are all things that I think Stashh specifically as a platform is exploring, but we're far from the only platform on Secret that's exploring those types of opportunities. It's just going to be a really exciting year.
Okay, so because NFTs are such a broad category, or they can be,
Yeah.
If you had to narrow it down, like if you had to
Even
do like
more
PFPs or like game items or like virtual land or
I'll say gaming. I mean, I love the idea. I also did an internship at Riot Games back in the day. So
Cool.
like I've seen the passion of gamer communities, right? But gamers are also people who, let's not paint with too broad a brush here, but they really hate NFTs because they've been taught about NFTs the wrong way. The way I talk about NFTs, they really like. I'm not the typical person out there talking about NFTs. The typical person talking about NFTs is really focusing on like the commercial aspects. They're like, wouldn't you love to have this global permissionless auction house for in-game items? And gamers are sick of the idea that every single social interaction in a game is going to be marketified. They play games for the joy of it, for the emotional experience, but gamers are your ultimate demonstration that people are willing to pay for non-tangible digital items, use them in ways that are both utility-based but also cosmetic. All of that has already been proven out. Now we need to teach them, hey, there's this platform. This is layer one, and there's these applications being built on it where it's permissionless. Like you really own your items. It's not like you can't withdraw it from some sort of centralized custodian of your NFTs. They're privacy preserving. You get to choose whether somebody knows you own it or not. You get to choose whether somebody knows what's inside them or not. It's you. It's all about you. And you put them at the center of that experience. Add that into this, everything I was saying about like imperfect information gaming, the fact that on Secret you can build games where not every player has the same information as another. Now, instead of building checkers, you're building StarCraft. That's so much more interesting. Fog of War games, anything like poker, you need a network like Secret to build that. So it feels like there's this unbelievable opportunity, not only for running game logic and running the game state through Secret, but also having assets secured by Secret and then used in those games and traded on marketplaces that are on Secret, and you can have privacy preserving auctions for those assets. So if I have to keep getting narrow, right, we're like private dApps, NFTs, gaming. I really just think seeing innovation in gaming, Web3 gaming on Secret specifically, not around play to earn models, but maybe play to access models, to me, super interesting. And we are integrating gaming directly into the Stashh platform. But that's, for another time.
Very cool. All right. So I have a question about just broader blockchain adoption. Back in 2017, I know you have to, we're roughly 20 minutes here, a little bit less. I know back in 2017, I was like, oh man, 3 years from now, the whole world's going to be using blockchains. It's just so much better. I mean, today, they weren't better back then, but like, I know where it's headed and the whole financial system will be better and internet will be better. Everything's going to be better. And it just turns out that like, yeah, it's not happening like that. It's not that fast. Yeah. In your opinion, like why is blockchain not being used more when the value add is very apparent and is very real?
Well, we say it's very real. From a morality standpoint or an ethical standpoint, you can make certain arguments about it. But remember that there's a lot of people who just do not like what blockchains do. And we also have to remember that a lot of people have gotten a very real reason to dislike how blockchains operate, and they dislike the people who represent it publicly. That's what happens when you've got a tool. It's just a tool. There's nothing to say that the people who are public advocates for this technology are good people. And over the past, let's say, half decade, many of them have proven not to be good people. And the people that we would want to be spokespeople for the industry, like Vitalik maybe, are not always front and center, and they don't do press tours. Like they don't want to be in front of the media. They don't see themselves as evangelists for the technology anymore. And the ones who are the best evangelists are also extremely rich and maybe not terribly motivated to put themselves out there, especially with so much regulatory scrutiny or everything else. But that doesn't mean that's not a problem. We do need good spokespeople and educators for the industry. The other piece is just, what's the killer app? What has been the killer app for blockchain? Until OpenSea took off, there was no killer app for blockchain. Like no one was going out at night and using Uniswap. The killer app was Binance. Think back to 2017 ICOs. People were using EtherDelta if they were power users and motivated and somehow were able to keep all their assets. But realistically, it was Binance because you could log in, you deposit assets to a centralized custodian, you hope they don't go bankrupt, you gamble with it. FTX made it even easier. You just take margin positions on everything. You don't even need crypto. Just trade the perps. That was what people thought was the killer app of crypto, was that it was just a speculation house, and the permissioned centralized solutions for gambling performed better because Web 2 stuff just works better. I don't think we've seen a killer app for blockchain that everyday users are passionate about. But that is where I personally have a thesis around NFTs and gaming and metaverses, because there is a pain point there. This pain point around ownership. And it goes back to the very first beginnings of cryptocurrency, this idea of not your keys, not your coins. Okay, so not your keys, not your NFTs. How's that going to manifest for people? Why are they going to care about that? The more people get deplatformed from social, the more people lose access to their gaming assets or their social identities and reputation. I do think what just happened to Twitter with the Elon Musk takeover is probably the best educational moment that Web3 has had. It just happened to coincide with this absolute implosion of goodwill after Sam Bankman-Fried. We have to recover from that. We have to rebuild from the ground up. We have to have better spokespeople, better apps, better user experiences. But there's definitely an awareness in the public consciousness that there are issues with the way that our current systems are constructed. People know that now. Now they're ready for an alternative. We have to be ready to give them one.
Love it. All right. Are you ready for the closing questions?
Hit me. What do we got?
Alrighty. What are you bearish on?
In crypto or outside?
Anything in the world.
Commercial real estate.
Why?
Because we're all working from home. Look where we are. Look where you are. I think the future is, I've said this to a lot of people, the future feels like it's conferences. Like people are going to go to conferences just to meet with the people that they work with, especially if we have more distributed teams. So people meeting up in interesting locations to have passionate, creative discussions with people they work with and just doing long offsites with them. You know, you take a week every 2 months, let's say, to work in person with your team to rebuild those connections. And that's a smaller expense than commercial real estate, is flying everybody into these locations if need be. So I don't know. And I say that living in Chicago and loving Chicago and having a massive amount of commercial real estate here, but it wouldn't be what I would be investing in. That's, I guess, especially not at this interest rate environment.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because our team's distributed at Suffermion, and we literally meet we'll be like, oh, Consensus is in Austin. Okay, we'll meet there. Oh, yeah. NFT NYC in New York City. Okay, we'll do that one. So yeah, you're 100% accurate there.
We do it. That's how a lot of these organizations already work. So if we're already seeing it, the trend is your friend. Don't fight it.
All right, what are you bullish on? Okay, but besides anything you're specifically working on.
Oh man, I'm such a consummate shill. It's really hard to step outside what I'm personally working on. I only work on things that I'm bullish about. It would really suck to work on things that I wasn't bullish on. That would be very painful. But I'm bullish on plenty of things, right? Like I'm bullish on a re-emphasis on the purpose of technology as opposed to solutions looking for problems. And maybe interest rates have a good deal to do with this, but people are finally starting to ask what the point of all of this stuff is, right? So AI is an example. What's the point of AI? Show me where it's going to make somebody's life better in some way and not create a bunch of tangential, awful problems. And then I'll be more excited about it as like a hype-driven technology. Clearly it's powerful. ChatGPT and other things are showing off just like how powerful the core tech can be, how disruptive ultimately it can be. But until that's a consumer product that's benefiting people's lives, both creators and consumers, then I'm not an AI maximalist. I'm not bullish on just like the technology. I also know it could end the world. So I think what I'm bullish on just in general is the public discourse. Understanding the nuances of these conversations. People are asking themselves really hard questions. And I think that Gen Z, like newer generations, they understand the trade-offs. They understand that their entire generation needs therapy because of what social media did to them. They lived it. With that awareness, I think is going to come very healthy evolutions in the purpose of technologies. And as builders in Web3, we need to be conscious about whether we're contributing to that trend or whether we're actively slowing it down. through the products that we're creating.
That's awesome. All right. What do people misunderstand about you?
Me personally?
You personally?
I guess I meet a lot of people in a lot of different contexts. So sometimes they probably see me in full on marketing mode. Sometimes they see me just being super goofy. Sometimes they catch me on a bad day and I'm just an asshole, right? So people get stuff about me wrong all the time because they're only ever seeing me in one mood on one day. A lot of the time, I meet so many people one time, right? Especially at conferences or when you're a public figure, like that just happens. So I would say most people might think that I'm not that multi-dimensional if they just see me shilling secret all the time, which they do in the Web3 space. But I have a lot of interests. Did you know that I used to be a music director at improv theaters in Chicago?
No, I had no idea.
You didn't know that? Oh, that's
crazy.
Yeah. Like I have a weird past and a weird present, right? But really the theme is just I work on what I think is interesting and good and makes people happy.
That's awesome.
So as long as I get to keep doing that.
It sounds human. You're like, I have, I have my faults, I have my good things, I have, et cetera. Yeah. So very cool.
I can be very impatient. I don't think anybody gets that wrong about me though.
That's a good quality. That's a very good quality. I like people that are patient.
I need you to convince my fiance of that.
Yeah. I will. I'll try. All right. Well, let me see the next one. Oh, this is a good one. All right. What was your biggest failure and what did you learn from that experience?
I tried to change a Web2 company from the inside. When I was at Snapchat, looking at the way they were operating, seeing how they were thinking about growth and product and social at that time when they were about to be disrupted by Instagram stories and they didn't really understand it yet. I tried to change the culture. I tried to change their approach to how
by yourself.
A lot of the time it felt like it was by myself.
That's crazy.
But I mean, they also grew from 1,300 to 2,500 people while I was working there over the course of 10 months. So
that's crazy.
Anybody could have done anything at that point. They were growing too fast. And it was a very, very awesome learning experience because I got to see what was working and what wasn't. And I got to see all the numbers. I was on the growth data science and revenue data science teams. I saw what worked. I saw what they thought worked and definitely did not work. It was nice to be able to have theses and then be able to test them directly. But what I failed at was convincing other people I was right. And now being in a smaller space where there's fewer sacred cows and not 1,300 people at any organization, it's a lot easier to feel like you're denting the world. And this world of Web3 needs to be dented very badly. I don't think Snapchat thought it needed to be dented because it was about to IPO for billions of dollars. So, I failed at changing an organization that really had no reason to change other than the fact that I wanted it to. And as an active user of their product, I desperately wanted it to work differently. And it wasn't the right time for them and it wasn't the right time for me, but I learned a lot of lessons about what it takes to get that stuff done. And one of those big lessons is it's easier if you're the CEO.
Yeah, that's true. That's awesome. All right, last question. How do you define success?
I'll feel successful if people use what I build. I think that would be good because there's a lot of ways to make money in the world, a lot of ways to make money in crypto, more ways to lose money, but very few ways, as you said, to get attention and scarce attention and keep it. So I'm sure I could get people's attention doing a lot of things. I could strip naked and run around and all that stuff works on a temporary basis. But what would actually make me feel successful is if they stuck around, even after I put my clothes back on and used what was built and told me they liked it, told me through their actions that they valued it and they spent money on it and they made friendships and connections through it. And they became the people they wanted to become because they used those products. That stuff just feels good, honestly. I don't have any other definition for success because everything else just kind of feels like shuffling the deck chairs around on the Titanic a lot of the time. And there's a lot of ways where you can personally be successful, but watch the world you're building in completely catch on fire and implode. And I don't want to see that happen. I definitely would like to see Web3 succeed. I'd like to see users be empowered. There's a lot of ways in which I think I've been personally successful, but I've watched the space take dozens of steps backward. So now it's more about, forget my personal success. Let's get Web3 back on track for its success. And you just kind of have to trust that by virtue of Web3 succeeding and what you did to contribute to that, something good will happen for you too.
That's awesome. Tor, thank you so much for joining me today. It was awesome chatting with you, and we will chat again soon.
Always a pleasure, man. Thanks for having me on.